Dear God in heaven, we thank you for the blessings of the Sabbath. We thank you that we can stop and spend this time, use this time to learn more about you and what our role is, what we're meant to be doing, what we're meant to be learning. Lord, as we attempt to do that this morning, we pray for your Holy Spirit. We pray for a blessing and understanding, so that we can better understand who you are and what our role is. We thank you for all your goodness. We thank you for um, the privilege of hearing the things we do, and help us to keep our. There's a lot of crazy things happening at the moment, and we just pray for you to help us to keep our eyes fixed on prophecy and the things that you want us to learn. We pray in Jesus' name. Okay. It's been a little while since I've presented, and a lot has happened. A lot of messages, a lot of information's come our way in the past few months, 3, 4, 5 months. And so I've sort of wanting to take a little bit of a step back, and I'm going to use the whiteboard still. I haven't converted over to the digital whiteboard yet, but we'll still use it for the moment. I just want to go back to if this is a table, here we are. Well, that's not very good. Let me start that again. Here's a table. This is us as people, and here we are standing on this table. And this table that we were standing on was the Sunday law equals a law. That's how we've always thought. And it went from originally we've got, it's a law about Sunday. There's this Sabbath law coming, and that is going to mark the Sunday law. And then it went from, well, now we know about equality. Now it's going to be about a law about equality. There's going to be some law that comes in that's about equality, and it's going to start taking down equality in some way, and they're going to bring in laws about that. And now that was the new Sunday law, but essentially it was still about law. And what's interesting over the past 12 months, we've actually, I'm going to do a round table. I know it looks like a mushroom, but pretend it's a table. We've jumped off this table, and now we're saying, no, the Sunday law no longer equals the law. The Sunday law equals an election. Sunday law equals an election. So we had all these legs that we used here to demonstrate that Sunday law was a law, whether it was Ellen White. You could use a traditional understanding of Daniel. Many reasons why not just us, but Adventism stood on that table. But now the movement has jumped across, and now standing on this table. And I know as we're learning about July 18, and I think a lot of us are getting a better understanding of how that works and why it is. But that premise is still based on that the Sunday law is based somehow on an election. And so I'm sort of going back because I think if I got all of us here in the Midnight Watch, all our different groups, if I got, say, I put everyone on the spot, say, can you demonstrate why it's no longer a law and it's an election? I'm guessing most of us will probably start struggling to explain why we're actually standing here now and how that happened. And that's what the last ICM was about in France in October last year. Um, I guess Elder Parminder realised, and everyone in the movement realised, whether there was still 30% of people here, but most people were over here, including the teachers, and they're all saying, most of the teachers are saying, oh yeah, it's about elections now. And yet there were still people in the movement thinking it's about some sort of equality law that's going to come in. And so Elder Parminder's over here and he's going, well, we need to prove that. And I know there's some teachers in our movement that understood this, but the bulk of the people didn't. And so what I want to do, and I think Graham started doing it as well, we just want to review, instead of drawing a table with 4 or 5 legs, how many proofs did the ICM come up with that, well, hang on, demonstrated it's no longer a Sunday law based on some law that's going to come in, and now it's going to be the dragon, but now it's based on an election. And the ICM gave us 5 proofs. I didn't want to say put 5 legs here because the point of each one of these proofs is that proof can stand on its own. So when we stand on this table, even though there's 5 proofs, 4, 5, I could grab any one of those proofs, put it here, number 1, and we can stand on that table and go, yep, I can prove, yep, I'm comfortable with that. It just so happens there's 5. So then we can grab number 3 and we can put that there and we can stand on number 3 on its own. I didn't want to draw 4 legs there because then it means you need all 4 to prove it. Each one of them proves it. So for me, I wanted to go,
Sorry,
let's just,
Brendan.
yes.
Do you want us to hold questions until the end? Or
It's up to you. I might kick it to the end depending on what it is. Go for it. I'm happy for
so
discussion.
my question is, um, if each proof can stand on its own, does that mean everyone has to accept all 5?
That goes into that to answer that, which is what the whole ICM was about. Elder Parminder said that there's multiple teachers and they're all going to say some stuff. And it's up to us to understand how we deal with symbols and structures. So when we analyze each one of these, we as individuals need to interrogate them and do they hold up? Are they using symbols correctly or are they using them illegally? Are they using structures correctly or are they using them legally? And so I'm not answering it, but I sort of am. Depending on how you view, how you interpret symbols and structures, or both, or how you draw symbols out of structures. And that was the main controversy, if you want to call it that. The main problem was some teachers didn't think, some teachers were using symbols in a way that other teachers didn't think you could. And they said, we can't do that. And we'll get into that in a little bit anyway. Does that answer it enough for the moment? I
Yes,
think
thank you.
if you understand, once you understand symbols and structures in a certain way, you will accept all of those. If you disagree and say, no, you're using those symbols illegally, you might say, no, I have a problem with that or that. We're not going to go into structures today. All we're going to do, let's jot them down first. What do we got? Give us our 5 proofs.
Daniel 6.
All right, so speak into that. So Marilyn said Daniel 6, correct? What's another one?
The rise and fall of nations was another one.
Correct. Rise and fall of nations. Give us another one.
Maximus Goodness.
Sorry, can you please repeat that? I really want to hear that.
Maximus Goodness.
Maximum Gergus. QMF.
Was that
Gurgis.
Gurgis, the flood? Fabius Maximus Gurgis, I think that's what you said. It was very, very quiet.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Quintus Fabius Maximus.
Yep,
Maximus
good job.
Gurgis.
So we'll go the flood or FMG. Correct, 2 more. I'm doing it in a specific order, as you can tell.
Was Julius.
January 6th.
January 6th, thank you. And John's given us our last one, which is Julius Caesar.
Yeah, 6.
So now, given that, we could grab any one of those, prop under that table, and we can now stand on. We're going to deal with one today. So the goal today is by the end of today, we want to go, I'm going to deal with this one here, Rise and Fall of Nations. And hopefully or if someone else wants to do it, I just want by the end of today, everyone can go, who's listening in our groups, we can go, yes, I'm comfortable to stand on this, and I can see that the Rise and Fall of Nations proves that the Sunday law is no longer about laws, it's actually about an election. So that's the goal. We want to be able to tick that, and then next time, someone else could do it. We want to go to Jan 6, the flood, Caesar, even though our teachers have already done this, by the way. We're just repeating what they're saying. So these have already been, but I guess within yourself, you want to be able to know that you're standing on it. You understand what they're saying to a level that you can go, hence. We've moved off that table, which has stood for a long time, and we've just jumped off it in the past year. Pretty big stuff. Okay, so again, why is the Sunday law about an election cycle? How is the Sunday law about an election cycle? Not just any election cycle, but the 2024 election cycle. And the teachers used a particular method to find that out. And I started to begin with Ray, they used symbols and structures to demonstrate that. Okay. That's how they did it. They got these proofs by using symbols correctly and by using structures correctly. And I don't know whether you all remember, but Elder Parminder almost gave a warning for the ICM. Awesome advice. He said, when you're watching the presenters speak, remember he said there was criteria, by the way, you're not allowed to refer to angels, you're not allowed to reference Elder Tess or Elder Jeff or anyone else, and no media sources. So in other words, you're on your own and you've got to prove it using the Bible and using these things correctly. And Also, we're not going to go into this today, but also they had to define the symbols of Revelation 17, the head, the beast, and the woman. We're not going to go into that today at all. But in saying that, I have heard in the past few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, that perhaps I think it's still important for us to go back and review that, because particularly something like the woman, if you're still thinking that the woman is anything other than an entity with an ideology, meaning a person that has agency. So if you think it's anything other than a person, because a person has agency, if you think it's anything other than that, like it's Marga or anything else, you really need to go back onto how they developed the understanding of the woman. And it goes with the other symbols as well. So please, if you're not quite sure on those 3 symbols, there's plenty of presentations that lay those out. But like I said, we're not going to go into those today. Okay, so before we go into this, we want to lay, I guess, what do I want to do? Lay some groundwork. We want to lay a context as to how to understand the rise and fall of nations. And the question is, why do nations rise and fall in the first place? Why does that even happen?
Bad.
John said they start off good and go bad. Molly, what did you say?
The power struggle.
Power struggle. Yeah, power struggle. Who's the power struggle about? Who's doing that? Human beings, yeah?
Yeah, people. Yeah.
People. So there's 2 things to consider when we think about the context of the rise and fall of nations. A, why is there 7? Why is there even 7 nations? And I think Aldred Parminder addressed this. He said, well, because Satan decides that it needs to be 7. And without going into the symbology yet, we'll do that later. But when you break down the number 7 and you trace that back, that symbol means completion, perfection. And so I guess Lucifer is using that and saying now he's ready with, or they are ready with their complete, perfect kingdom to do. But again, there's also a lamb in there. How do you explain that? Because the lamb's not the mountain, the lamb is on the other side, and the teachers have been dealing with that for about 3 months now. What's the lamb about? Is that based on, why is there a lamb there? Is it based on God? Is it based on Satan? Or is it based on people?
One of Eleuthery's study was character of the nation.
And so I'm asked, yeah, so thank you, Molly. I'm asking these because the context we're trying to look at, there's 2 things going on. You've got Satan on one side, who's developing a kingdom to fight God and trying to affect that. And on the other side, you've got human beings. And so if I drew like a column here, you've got Kingdom 1, 2, let's move over a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you've got Satan on one side. However, I want to define Satan. There you go. and you've got, say, human beings on the other. Now, this is kingdoms: Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, etc., 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 down to the seventh. And so, as these two groups, Lucifer and human beings, are going through history, Lucifer's trying to create, I guess, I think Elder Parminter used a really good word, a war machine to do battle with God's kingdom. So that's the goal of Satan as he goes through these kingdoms. And on the other side, what have you got? You got people doing whatever they want to do. And human beings, can God control human beings and force them to do what God wants them to do?
No.
Can Satan force human beings to do what Satan wants them to do?
No.
So now, as we go through down here, we've got kings and pharaohs. We end up with, until we get down to human beings, when they get to about here. In this history, through the Enlightenment period, human beings have worked out something, and they've gone, we don't like the way these government models work. We all want a better life. We want to be treated properly. We want to be treated more equitably. And human beings have worked out, by the time we get down to here, that a form of democracy is the way to go, because that is the way collectively human beings have pretty well decided, well, that is a better form of government that helps serve us so we are treated better. Whereas all through here hasn't worked out quite so well. So collectively human beings have said, well, by the time we get to this down here, number 6, we need to have this form of government. For the people, of the people, by the people, for the people. You know what I'm saying. Did Satan have anything to do with that? Or was it human beings just deciding that? And then Satan just has to go, well, okay, well, now I've got to create a war machine in this new context. Human beings want this government to change. So now I have to make it work here now. I have to make it work down in number 7 now. 7 is quite a bit different, the model, than up here. So what happens if you get to, say, 3 or 4 and the country itself destroys itself? So Satan's picked this country, this kingdom, pick the person, and they go and destroy themselves. Satan has to start again with a new one. So I guess there's tension here. You've got Lucifer's goals, and then you've got humans' free will doing, I guess, in a sense, derailing those plans as well. Until we get to the 7th, and Lucifer says, yep, that's it, we're good to go. We're perfect, we're good, we're complete, and now we can do battle. So by the time we get down to here, but Satan's had to deal with human beings, I guess wanting to improve their lives. That's the point. And the point is, even bad people want to be treated nicely. So it doesn't matter, good people, bad people, they've all collectively said that, well, these form of king's government seats, they're not fit for the purpose that we want. And so they start changing. Through the French Revolution, the Enlightenment period started spreading, and prophetically, John would say the Sixth Kingdom in 1798. But there's a whole history before that that demonstrates people are these new ideas of self-government is taking hold. But prophetically, John stands on this.
Start with the Magna Carta, wouldn't it? Things like that.
Okay. So if you do want to speak, just ask for it. Okay. So human beings want a more equitable life, and Satan has to deal with that as he's trying to build a war, as they are trying to build a war machine. Okay. So there's the context. So now you're seeing nations rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. And as we go through Revelation or Daniel, you've got all these symbols. And it's the same subject time and time again. You've got Daniel 2, 7, 8, 9, 11, Revelation 11, 13, 17. They're using symbology to describe these as like wild beasts, wild animals. And they're measured by their ability to kill or destroy. And so you got lions and leopards. Then you got so they're measured on their ability to fight and defeating each other. And so the point here is this is true for the first 5 kingdoms, but it changes when we get to the 6th. Revelation 13 describes it as a lamb beast with 2 horns. The symbology gives us a lamb. And if we go to Great Controversy, which is quite a famous quote, which we could go to GC 439.3 to 441.2. She describes as she sees these other beasts, and then she sees this contrast when the lamb rises up out of the earth, and the symbology gives us a lamb, and she identifies that as being gentleness or youthful innocence. So, and that would identify the character of that nation. So it describes the rise of the USA in 1798. So all the nations in the sea destroyed each other. And then there's a clear delineation here, right here, between 5 and 6. So I might even draw it a bit differently. I might just go, let's just say we've got, what have I got here? I'll put a gap there, but it's not just a gap. It's just basically, say, John standing on the beach, if you like. And then you've got 6 and then 7 down the track. I guess the point here, there's a reason, I guess, John was taken in time to this place here. And it's, when you look back that way, you're seeing all these aggressive animals who destroy each other by war. Okay? But when John looks that way, totally different space. And so we've got war, and then you've got democratic process. Now, I also understand that there's other stories going through here where, well, I don't see it was that peaceful during, the United States rising, you know, attacking and killing Indigenous people, plenty of bloodshed through that history. I understand that, but I guess what this is focusing on is as it arrived in history in 1798 and it started developing its government. It did it on democratic principles. It did it on, it really was by the people. It was for the people and it was of the people. I know it wasn't every person back then, but the principle was there. So the whole way the government operates was totally different. And so that's what Ellen White is identifying here. It's a fundamental shift in how the kingdoms rise to power. They just dominate each other and just kill each other by war. Whereas they had elected representatives who did that. So, and Ellen White also talks about the horns meaning republicanism and Protestantism. I think maybe they have, the context of that. I think I would see that a bit differently now. Republicanism, in my mind, would be the right to self-govern. It's like a protest to having a king over you. In other words, of the people, by the people, for the people. And the Protestantism, it's not necessarily religious. It's the right to worship the God that you want, or it's a protest against a figure like Pope telling you who or what to worship or what to believe. So it's, again, I guess if we look at republicanism and Protestantism, it's those two ideals are a defense against oppression or someone trying to downtrodden you. So those ideals, republicanism and Protestantism, it's like an empowerment in opposition to, I guess, the models in these histories. It's empowering the people decide. So the Sixth Kingdom rises and put a system in place whereby the people rule. So the Sixth Kingdom rises by a democratic process or gains power by a democratic process. It must lose power or fall by the democratic process or democracy. So therefore, the fall of the Sixth Kingdom and the rise of the Seventh has to be via the democratic process, which is an election, because it started that way. So, and you can see that model now, even if you look throughout all the world that aren't based on democracies as such, whether it's Putin's Russia, the world has changed to such a degree from this history that even dictators need to observe some form of election, because that's sort of that's how much it has changed. So even dictators need to demonstrate or submit to some form of democratic process and adhere to some form of elections. In other words, they still need to use that to gain power and stay in power. I'm not suggesting they don't twist it and cause all sort of problems in that, but there's still, who would have thought a king would, in this history, would be accepting any sort of voting from anyone? But authoritarians now still have to consider that to stay in power. I just want to draw this out, I think, because when I drew this out, it's sort of, I think it explains it. It's drawing this out, but in a bit more detail. So I think I'll do that. Might just rub off some of that. Now, if anyone's got any questions or anything, by all means. Okay, 5th, 6th, 7th. So the 5th, how did it rise? I'm just going to use the symbol of a sword. If you're okay with that. So it lives by the sword and it dies by the sword. Or if we go to Daniel 9, we'll say the desolator gets desolated. Okay, so it lives and it dies by the sword. So that's the 5th. We've just learned in the 6th what happens. It lives. I'm going to use another symbol that we're familiar with that like we can say that is an election. I don't want to draw a script or a voting ballot. I'm going to draw a beam. Instead of a sword, a broad beam. Let's call it a broad beam. It lives by the democratic process, therefore dies by the democratic process. Now, here we are. Remember back here, I'm glad I kept this up here. John standing on the beach, in the sea, and the land. How do kings rise and fall? First 5, by the sword. But when we've got this delineation right here that God is painstakingly trying to show us, and when we're facing this way, we're looking towards the land. The rise and fall of nations happens quite a bit differently. Now, how does it work?
Voting.
The democratic process. Correct. And so whether it's the 6th or the 7th, the model has changed. So it lives. It's an interesting question. It lives, it dies. It lives. I'm unsure. I mean, the model should suggest that it dies by the democratic process, but I'm not going to say that. I don't know because there's no 8th.
No.
All right, so there's no 8th, but there is God's kingdom. So how it goes from the 7th and then God's kingdom rules, I don't know whether it fits within this model. So even though the model looks like, yeah, it should die by the democratic process, maybe that's true, but there's no 8th. So whether it is that or not, I don't know. The model suggests that it's still in the land, but I'll put my hands up. I'm not sure.
Can I make
But
a
yes.
little suggestion?
Sure.
It's just a thought. It doesn't necessarily mean anything of itself, but if God has a people in the end, albeit not a lot of them, and they make a choice, they choose God's government, that's a form of democracy because, in one sense, choosing is like voting. So there is a democratic process in that Christ has won, or God has won the great controversy through having a people that glorify God or stand for God's character and God's government. So you could, in one sense, say that's a form of a democratic choice and government.
Mm.
A little
Yeah.
bit of a stretch, maybe. I don't think so. I
Oh,
actually
look,
think I can see how that.
it's possible. Yeah. Maybe
As I said, it's
that's
just a thought.
yeah. And look, I'm sure that will become more apparent in the next dispensation.
Yeah.
What that looks like. Yeah. We keep getting
I
surprised,
know.
don't we?
I know
Is
Parminder has. Oh, sorry, Ray, I'll just say, I know Parminder has pointed out that we do need to be able to discern the difference between the two governments, Satan's form of government and God's form of government. So, in that sense, that implies there has to be a choice, and there are people in the world who choose the wrong sort, and then there are a remnant that choose the right government. Anyway, that was just my. Go ahead, Grace.
I was just gonna add that if the Sixth Kingdom fell by the democratic process, um, then shouldn't we expect that God's kingdom rises by the democratic process as well? And it's been taught in the past that when Adam and Eve fell, that act was a vote against God's government. So shouldn't we expect it to see God's government rise by that democratic process as well?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
A.T. Jones and Wagner said the same thing too. I read an article where they say the same thing with the voting in is sort of true republicanism. I don't know how that goes with the king. And you could say the eighth kingdom is the promised land, I suppose. And
Yeah,
also
look,
they said that the fifth kingdom was where the Republican started. Republicanism, the voting. They voted in Caesar and two others. I think Elder Terry might have touched on it. No, that's just a comment anyway.
yeah. I guess thank you, Tinny. I appreciate that.
I think in Dan it's Josephine, sorry, I interrupt you. You go
Okay.
ahead and then I'll say what
No,
I
let's go
wanted
ahead,
to
Josephine.
say. I think in Daniel, I'm trying to think in my head what chapter, but it says the kingdom was given unto the saints. So who chose to give the kingdom to the saints?
You can answer
In the
that.
end. Well, in the end, then that was Christ giving the kingdom to the saints. So he's elected to give the kingdom to the saints.
So even though we're all focusing on this end, I guess to get a better understanding of God's kingdom, we need to get a better understanding of Satan's kingdom. I
Sorry,
unlike
Brenden. I just
yeah.
had another thought. Is this where looking at the 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 weekend of the crucifixion is so powerful because we see those two kingdoms come so closely together. In we see Satan's kingdom rile up the people, demanding that Christ be crucified, and we see Christ submit to what the people want. And even though that looks like a catastrophic defeat, it's God's kingdom um,
Triumphant.
yeah, triumphant. Yeah, it was just a thought.
Hmm. I don't know. I guess from what I'm doing today, and look, that's all fascinating, and I'm not sure how that will all transition, how that's going to look. But what we're wanting to do is we want to stand on that, and we want to know that is the Sunday law, if that can prove it. And so as we've going through here, the fifth lives by the sword, dies by the sword. That's how those 5 kingdoms came to power and lost power. We know that. That's just historical. Once we get to the sixth, as messy as it is, it's still once it removed itself from slavery, I guess, and started rising, it rose using that democratic process. And so Ellen White would call that peacefully. This was not peacefully. Let's just say war. And it died peacefully. So therefore the seventh rises peacefully. And I'm going to keep the question mark there. And when I say peacefully, that's the electoral process. So already, without even going any further, because the delineation or the marker for think about when we were back here, what was the marker for the Sunday law? It's when the government did what? And then it started being a dragon. All right, so even back then we knew that it went from a lamb to a dragon. At that moment, that was the Sunday law. So the moment it goes from a lamb to a dragon, or from kingdom 6 to kingdom 7, we know the marker is the Sunday law. All right, so here we were looking for laws. So now when we strip it back and we're still going from the 6th to the 7th, what's the marker from going to the 6th to the 7th? How does the kingdom go in this history, how did the 4th go to the 5th?
War.
Violence and oppression, they defeated each other. Think of the prophetic models that God used. You got these crazy beasts, aggressive beasts, violent beasts. Now we get into this history, it's totally different space. It's on the earth, and it rises and falls differently now. And what's the marker between 5 and 6, or 6 and 7?
Voting them out.
Democratic.
How does the 6th go to the
Election.
7th? Has to be. The model has changed. We're no longer in the sea. John's looking at the earth now. The earth behaves differently. It's peacefully. So when you, I guess, step outside of bias and you look at the modeling, you know how these rise and fall, and you know how these rise and fall, and you know what the marker is. It's the electoral process. That's the only way this can take that, or this can rise. I don't want to say this take that. That's the only way this can rise. Let's say this defeat that. Maybe I should say that, but it defeats it in a different way. What's time? Okay, the US didn't rise by overthrowing other nations. We've talked about this despite there being a lot of bloodshed and problems. I guess the point it's making is that the creation of this kingdom after its independence from slavery was done in a democratic way. And I guess the US calls it an experiment because it was an experiment. Why is it an experiment? Why do they call it an experiment?
Been done before.
Hadn't been done before. And it's an experiment. And where they were to have a representative government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's the purpose. It was for the people. The people decide how it is, and what is the mechanism by which the people decide? Voting, elections. So once you know how a kingdom rises, you know how it comes to its end, because what is the principle it lives by? Live by the sword, you die by the sword. The principle is how you rise is how you fall. That's the principle. Throw sword in the bin. The principle is how something rises is how something falls. Is everyone comfortable enough at this point to say, can you see the logic in stepping from here to here, now saying, well, just logically, it has to be elections, even at this point? Is everyone comfortable enough that the rise and fall of nations between the 6th and the 7th is an election, just by what we've just done? Is that enough? Because we're going to do it in a different way next. Say no if you don't think it's enough. Say it.
Brenden,
Yes.
you say, and I think it's been said before you, that one of those 5 proofs can stand on its own.
Yeah.
So if the rise and fall of the 6th, of the 5th to the 7th is by election, the other way too is by election. I think I understand that, unless that's
Right. So just based on what we've done so far and seeing this, are you comfortable now? Can you see that it's no longer a law, or perhaps never was a law, but we now can say, just on that first proof, can you see that the only way, using Revelation or Daniel, rise and fall of nations, Daniel 2, 7, 8, 9, and 11. And I guess we're referring to Revelation as we're doing this. So I think you're saying, Josephine, that this is enough for you to say, yes, I can stand on that platform, which is number 1. Let me put it here. Here's number 1. Here's number 1. You're saying the rise and fall of nations is the Sunday law now is an election based on what we've done so far. Is that enough for you, or are you saying, no, it's not enough for you?
I'm trying to.
Because remember,
That's enough for me.
everyone's
Sorry,
saying this.
I was having
Everyone's saying
problems
this. Sorry, go.
with the mic. That's enough for me. I was just having problems with the mic. That's
okay.
enough for me. Yeah. The marker, the timing and the marker, those two things go together. That's enough for me.
So remember, in the history, thank you, Josephine, the Sunday law was when the government does something bad and makes laws and forces people. Lamb to dragon. That's how it originally was. So the marker between lamb and dragon, 6 to 7. Here we are. We're going from 6 to 7. In this history, post 1798, the model for kingdoms rising and falling has changed. They don't go and beat each other with swords and bombs. They defeat each other. The 6th defeats the 7th. 7th defeats the 6th, sorry, peacefully via electoral process. That's just fact. That's just how it is.
Brenden.
Yes.
So, the fall of the Sixth Kingdom, the more that the messages have developed over time, in my mind now, it's becoming more of a process of a fall of the sixth. And the reason I'm saying that is because there's been a few waymarks called out lately for the fall of the sixth. One is 2021. And that's where we see the last president of the sixth has finished. And we've got the
Yes.
first president of the seventh being Biden starting in 2021. That's one waymark. Sunday law, which is the one we're talking about now, which was the focus of the ICM. So I think important and also still valid that it's through an election process. And also close of probation is where I think we also can mark the end of the sixth as it's like end.
Yes.
So when we're talking about this discussion, I just wanted to point out that nuance as well, that it's just become a little bit more, I don't know if we want to say complicated, but seems to be more of a simple view of that transition.
Yes.
But I still think it's got to do with the electoral process all along the way. It's peaceful. We're not seeing nations kind of defeating each other like in the old world. And I was wrestling a little bit with that as we've talked, but I think that's where I'm at the moment. Just still thinking, I think this argument still stands, even when we look at it as that process.
Catherine is right. Does everyone understand what Catherine's saying? So there's presentations recently that is clarifying this. I'm going back to base level. Remember Elder Tess years ago, she says, explain the atom, and you've got to go through all these stages. I feel like what I'm explaining now is part the way along that stage, and yet what Catherine's talking about is the next stage of understanding the atom. I guess I'm trying to just keep it simple, base level, ICM level, because information's hit us so fast that we've sort of jumped onto here, and now we're going July 18, which, yes, is correct and good, but July 18 is standing on this table, and everything else is as well. And I just want us to at least have a understanding of how it's developed. And I agree with Catherine. This is also nuanced. It's not as clean cut as what I'm saying. I hope everyone can forgive me for not going into the most recent stuff. I just wanted to get a baseline jumping off this table onto this table. Catherine, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I didn't intend to
No, it's fair.
anything.
It's good because people need to, whoever's listening also need to understand that this is developing, particularly in the past 3 presentations from Elder Parminder. But again, it's light. It just keeps unveiling. But if we could just get to the point where to go from the 6th to the 7th, it rises and falls by the electoral process. So therefore the 7th has to rise by the electoral process. So it's therefore the Sunday law has to have something to do with the electoral process, not laws as such.
The electoral process was when Biden got elected, which is the Seventh Kingdom.
Sure, we could do that as well. It's electoral process. Yeah. So John said, if you didn't hear that, Biden also got elected by the electoral process, which I guess begins the 7th. Now, if you haven't watched Elder Parminder's most recent presentations, that might not make sense, but I encourage you to do what Catherine has done and try and wrap your head around those. So in saying that, there is a hole, and I'm just going to say all this, but in a little bit of a different way. It's this transition. So I'll put that in a different color. So you've got this transition here. between the 5th and the 6th. And you've got a transition between the 6th and the 7th. So let's say, so when you look at the 5th to the 6th, well, hang on, the 5th dies by war, which is bad, and it 6th lives by elections or peacefully, and we'll say that's good. And then the 6th dies good, and the 7th rises good. And so why is there such a difference here? I'm just doing this in a different way. Remember the John standing here. So the rules change. This is where the rules change. And who changes the rules? So
People change the rules because they changed
Correct.
their location.
Yes.
Which goes, so can you see when you come back to here, you got people wanting a better life. So when we get to here, people are sick of that, over it. We all want better life, so we'll try this experiment. I reckon this is the better way to go. It's people, human beings. So my point is, Satan at the same time is trying to build this war machine, and Satan's got to deal with humans doing all this. Nations rising, falling. Now we're at a point where humans have decided that, well, now the best way for governments to rise and fall is to vote, and we're going to decide how that works. Back here, some king dictator just said, we're going to defeat them now and raise everyone. And so the rules change. People have changed that. That's why it's important to understand that context. You've got Satan on one side, human beings on the other. And by the time we get to the 7th, we've got this perfect, complete war machine ready to go. But
Brenden,
Lucifer had to deal with people having to vote that in. So I had to work a bit harder, I'm guessing. I don't know. Yes, Ray.
I don't know if this oversimplifies it, but is it kind of helpful to think of it that like if God has to work with people where they're at, then so does Satan?
100%. That's the main point. If God has to deal with all these kingdoms, all people, and meet them where they're at, Satan has to do the same thing. And this is where the people are at.
Can I make a comment on your drawing and what you said, Brendan, please?
Yes, Josephine, go ahead.
You see that arrow, those two tables? When a person jumps, we usually see in real life, we see the person jumping off to there. That arrow, I think, indicates that it's transition. So you find yourself on the other table where the son-in-law is, but you have to transition to that. Also, you're talking about where John was standing. He was standing on the beach, he was looking at the sea, and then he was looking at the land. There's a transition of how the vision was given to him. And I think those two go well together. Anyway, I hope I'm not making it complicated or sound silly.
No. What concerned me is everyone jumped, or we found ourselves here without us even knowing it, and we're saying the Sunday law's an election.
No, why?
We didn't know, like, we'd have this nuanced. I know some of the teachers were solid on it, but a lot of us, I'll say the vast majority of us, moved over here. We're going, yeah, that's great, and we're going, we don't even know why, how, or prove that. And that's why the ICM was so critical, because it answered that question. When you answer that question, you're comfortable, whichever proofs, however many you want to be comfortable with, the rest flows. It's like step by step. So we're not doing another one today. I'll just do this one. What's our time? I'm going to do this again in a different way. All right. So a symbol. Now we're going to go to what Ray's first question was. At the ICM, there was a disagreement on how do you handle symbols. And depending on how you handle that symbol depends on whether you think it's illegal or legal, what you're doing. So a symbol. Let's use, we might not finish this, but at least we can get started on it. Let's say we go to Revelation 17. We've got a symbol, so do it for yourself. I probably won't read it. Revelation 17, 9 to 10. Can everyone see when you read those that a head equals a mountain equals a king? Maybe I'll get someone to read it. Can I read that, please?
9 and 10.
Yep.
And and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
You see that 10 is a repeat of 9, and they're all saying the same sort of thing. So head is a mountain, is a king. Everyone okay with that before we even, I'm just assuming that we all can see that. Okay, so here we've got this symbol. We've got these symbols here. All right, how do we break that down? What's that? How do we do that? I'll go on this side. How do we do that? So we can option 1, get a dictionary understanding of that. Your Greek, Hebrew, Brown Driver, Briggs, Thayer's, Strong's, etc., etc. So if I just said, okay, let's just go to King. John, who's got a device open? Can someone tell me when you go to Revelation 17, I think it's wherever you see verse 9 or 10, wherever you see king, what does the Strong's say it is? What's the root word? What's the root of the word? Because we want to get to the baseline understanding of what it is. King equals what? No one's got a device open.
It's mountains.
Yeah, so king in the Strong's is G935. And the root of the word is foundation of power. Okay, so king equals foundation of power. But there's 2 ways of trying to understand, and look, I'm telling you how I understand this. And so I'll do my best to explain how I understand how to interpret symbols. And Curtis did a good presentation on this that I thought that helped me as well. So I'm using his examples because I found it quite helpful to me. And so option 1, you could look at the dictionary meaning of that and then develop an understanding. So we could go, okay, they all mean the same thing, but king, foundation of power. The second option, so that's option 1, you could do it that way. The other way is you could trace the symbol through the Bible. And so if I wanted to trace, say, mountain, John, do you want to go to Exodus 15:17? we want to understand what this means. It's just an example. Exodus 15:17. So just before John reads it, the context is, if you go to verse 14, this is where the Egyptians went through the Red Sea and they got killed and got flooded and washed away. And so Exodus 15 is like the song of praise to God for delivering them out of the hands of the Egyptians as they walked on the other side of the Red Sea. So this is their song of thankfulness. That's the context. So John, do you mind reading verse 17?
Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established.
And it's not just that verse, but what it's saying is, thank you, God, for delivering us. And now we're going to be put into a land and we're going to have a kingdom over there. And so it's basically, the context is saying the mountain is a symbol for a kingdom in that context. So Moses is celebrating victory over Egypt. So this has got nothing to do with Revelation 17, by the way. So we're going to a totally different space. We're trying to trace mountain and what it understands. So you grab the symbol in Exodus 15:17 out of its context, because now you can look at that and you go, oh yeah, mountain equals kingdom, because they're about to move into the new land and establish a kingdom. So we grab that out of its context, ignore where it comes from, ignore Exodus 15, but you still know that mountain equals kingdom. All right. My point is, you can either investigate the word like as a dictionary and get the baseline understanding of the word, or you can go to the Bible and try and find it in a story somewhere and try and understand what does the word mean in that history. So my question is, and this was the problem at the ICM. The question is, are you allowed to pull it out of its context? What happens if you are forced to bring the context with that? So you go, okay, mountain and kingdom. I'm going to bring that. What else do you have to bring with that? You have to bring the mountain with it. What else do you have to bring? Are you allowed to pull it out of its context and completely ignore it? Or are you forced to bring the whole story with you? What happens if you are forced to bring the story with you or the context? What do you have to bring with it? You don't just have to bring mountain equals kingdom and then you do what you need to do with it. Now mountain equals kingdom and the whole context. You've got to bring the story of Israel, Egypt, deliverance. There's this whole context that if you were forced to bring that whole, let's say, line of history with it, it becomes almost impossible to work. If you're forced to bring the context and how do you then use that? It almost then becomes structure upon structure. But we're not dealing with structure upon structure. We're dealing with a symbol. So this is, I'm not going into structures today, but the problem, I guess, between some of the teachers is some believed you could handle a symbol, identify it in the past, pull it out of its context, ignore the context, and then use it for something. Others would say, no, you're not allowed to do that. You've got to actually bring the context with it. And this goes back to what Ray was saying at the start. Depending on how you understand symbols and what you can and can't do with it, depending on whether you will agree or disagree with these. Another good one that is Daniel 6. Daniel 6 is a good one where you grab the symbol of prayer. No, it's not prayer. Supplication. Pull it out of Daniel 6. Try and work out what supplication means. Eventually, you can get to the point where, oh, that's actually, well, supplication. It's prayer. It's. You get to the point where it gets to elections or
Suffrage.
Suffrage. Thank you. It was suffrage. But then, ignoring the context, what if you had to bring the context of Daniel 6 with it?
It's about a law then.
Then it's about a law, and all of a sudden you're back on this table. But not necessarily. It depends on how you view Daniel 6. But I guess my point is, I believe you can grab a symbol out of its context, try and understand it, and in this case, Daniel 6 was actually placed back to Daniel 6, but that could have been used somewhere else as well. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close up. Okay, so let's do the last one. Because what are we wanting to understand? The seventh kingdom. All right, so I'm starting to get an understanding here of what this is, but we're dealing with the seventh kingdom. We've already dealt with that. As 7 as a symbol, what are the two options? We could either go to a dictionary, try and figure that out, or we could trace it through, go back and see where 7 is and trace it through the Bible. With this one, it's interesting because even if you went to secular sources, they would say the origins of, if you want to interpret what 7 or seventh means, even the secular sources would go back and identify creation. And they would say things like completion. I actually wrote a list. Wholeness, completeness, finished, perfection. And a lot of the secular sources would actually refer back to tracing it through the Bible and getting the context. And so you could go back to creation, and God on the seventh day rested, and it was very good. Maybe days 1 to 6 was good, but maybe good wasn't enough. And so, or on the 6th day, rested and said, now it's very good. So maybe in my mind, that means it's perfect. If it wasn't perfect, I'm not sure whether God would have kept going until God was satisfied that it needed to be what it needed to be. Okay. So essentially, when we've got to the seventh kingdom, or Lucifer's seventh kingdom, where he's got his Lucifer has their war machine. We can say that it's a foundation of power, it's a kingdom, and it's perfect, it's whole, it's complete, it's finished. So it's set up, ready to go. And we don't know much about the seventh kingdom, so what do we need to do? Here's our seventh kingdom. What do we need to do? We need to push it next to something that we know a bit more about. So I'm going to say in this case it's the 6th. So we need to push the 7th beside the 6th, because that's how parables work. So when we again go to Great Controversy 439.3, the 6th comes up out of the earth peacefully, not through wars, revolution. Didn't defeat another kingdom by water rule. So what we do, there's a contrast to the fifth kingdom out of the sea. So when we put the seventh next to the sixth, how did the sixth come to power? It was via democratic process. So when you put the seventh beside it, how does the seventh come to power? In the same way. So then because where do you find both the lamb and the dragon? Where are they both? On the earth. So you can see you force the seventh beside the sixth, and you can compare. But you can also, if you want to understand the sixth, you can also use the fifth to understand the sixth. Because if you go to Revelation 13:10, you can see that the fifth kingdom is killed by the sword. Therefore, it has to be killed with a sword. So it goes back. See, I'm just saying the same thing, but I'm just using the modeling to demonstrate it. The principle of what we said here, how it dies, it rises, how it lives, that's how it dies. So when you compare the fifth to the sixth, we know that the sixth, how it lives is how it dies. And so we know then that the seventh is, except I'm not sure how it dies, so I'll just put that addendum in. So the seventh, so when you bring them all together, so when you group them together, it tells you that the seventh gains life, is how the seventh rises to power. So therefore the Sunday law equals the seventh kingdom rising to power. And what is the marker? The electoral process. Now I'm going to stop there. I'm going to pray very shortly. I'm just going to ask one question. Is everyone satisfied that the rise and fall of nations, we can go now and put a tick on that? Can we now do that, or can we not? Is there someone who's saying, no, we can't do that yet? Or is everyone going, yeah, rise and fall of
That's a
nations?
yes
I'm
for
happy to stand on that.
Yes.
yes from me.
Okay. I want to hear from someone who doesn't agree, and if that's the case, I'll deal with that next time. If everyone's okay, if I don't hear anything, I'm moving on to the next one. Next time. All right. Sounds like I'm not hearing anything. So, okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. So what I'll do, I'll close in prayer. If you could join me. Dear God in heaven, we thank you for the privilege of listening to and learning about your messages for the past number of years, but particularly over the past 6 months where Revelation 17 has been opened in a way that has been really amazing. And we just thank you for that light. Help us to work hard and try and understand the best we can what you're trying to show us, lead and guide us. And we're just grateful for this Sabbath. Please bless all our families in Fiji and New Zealand and Australia. We just so grateful that we can come together and do this. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.